What's up, guys? This is Justin from the I Believe in Humans podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. This show is made possible with the generous donations from patrons like yourself supporting us over at Patreon. So head on over to Patreon, check out the different membership levels we have, subscribe, and take advantage of all the extra cool bonus content that we'll be throwing your way that is exclusive to Patreon members only. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate the support. We'll see you next time. What's up, family? Welcome back to the I Believe in Humans podcast, special edition, getting presidential on ya. I'm your host, Justin, and that's my co-host, Dustin Hire. How we doing, brother?
I'm doing great, man. I upgraded my life. I actually got a bidet. I don't know if I told you about that, but
wow,
a whole new me, dude. Whole new me.
A whole new you. There's
How you doing?
That's a whole new hole for you. I'm doing good, man. We're coming at you live, a little special edition because we've got the election coming up. I don't know if anybody knew, but there's a presidential election this year.
What?
Yeah, so we figured we'd weigh in on it, but it's definitely it's going to be an interesting one for sure. I know you did a lot of prep for this, so
to say the least. Yeah,
so much for doing that. Dude, honestly, I've been watching a lot of these like Saturday Night Live. I think they've been killing it, just sort of making fun of the debates and all the weirdness that's been going on with this stuff. So,
who's your favorite character?
I think I like the Jim Carrey Biden.
Yeah, I was gonna say, he kills it,
dude. It's nice to see Jim coming out of his transcendental meditation state to return to comedy.
Absolutely.
But he's been killing it. And are you a Carey fan? Carey Biden fan, I guess.
Oh, absolutely, man. He was the perfect actor for that role. I don't know who else could carry that one on. No
Maya Rudolph does a great Kamala Harris, and I mean, obviously Baldwin has just been killing it as Trump for so long. So it's been awesome watching them do these debates, and I think we've got the final presidential debate. So we're recording this like a week in advance. That's happening this Thursday. So we'll see what kind of shit show that turns into, which will be interesting.
Have you voted yet? Are you gonna vote early? Did you vote early?
I think I'm doing the absentee ballots because I don't know if our voters know or our viewers know, but I go in between sort of like the DC and New York area. So I had to do the absentee mail-in voting, which I believe I got last week. So those should be signed and in the mail already. And
nice.
Hopefully not being hoarded at some mailman's house or whatever, like these crazy articles with these people burning people's mail and all this stuff. So how about yourself? Have you voted yet? Or are you going to go do the live in-person thing? You going to...
Yeah, I mean, I haven't voted yet. I am going to go vote in person, though. I live right next to my polling station, which is a block and a half away from my house at an elementary school. So it's just a walk for me, man. I've voted there, I think, 3 times now.
Can you do the early? Are they going to do the early voting? Because
it's going to be open through next week, I believe. Last I checked, it just opened this week.
What I've seen on the news is like lines around the block and stuff.
Yeah, so that's why I didn't want to go first day.
Tomas, have you gotten in on the voting out there in California? What's your game plan?
I haven't voted yet. I think my ballot's in my mailbox. I got to go grab it. I haven't checked my mail in a few days.
Are you doing the mail-in then?
I will probably. There's drop-off centers in LA or boxes that they set up. I think I can just go drop it in one of those. It's super easy. So, nice. But I should probably do that soon, so I'm not waiting last minute and make sure that shit goes through.
I think California is one of the few states that's been doing the mail-in voting for like major elections, for actually like state elections for a while.
Yeah.
So I think they're sort of more equipped than some of these other states that are kind of late to the late to the party in terms of the mail-in stuff due to COVID.
Yeah,
so,
we're pretty set up.
It's good.
Here.
We've all got a game plan. And if you're listening to this, obviously, I hope you have a game plan too, regardless of who you vote for. I mean, we're all getting blasted with commercials and on social media. Everyone's telling you to get out to vote. So I guess we'll just jump on the bandwagon and like, dude, go out, vote. It's like the most American thing you can do. Like, you know, just remember other people in other countries don't get a chance to even vote. Mm-hmm. It's a fallacy. So hopefully, you know, people participate, because nothing kills me more than when someone wins that everyone bitches about, and you realize that, like, you know, half of the adult population didn't even get out of bed to go vote, and you're like, you know, you don't get to complain if you don't participate. You know what I mean?
I don't think it matters who wins. People are going to be bitching. It's going to be very interesting here coming up.
Well,
yeah, I mean, people bitch regardless. I mean, obviously people are extra bitchy this year. I mean, 2016 was pretty hot as well. But this is nothing new. If your guy loses, you're, you know, upset. You know, and then we spend 4 years listening to the other side sort of try to cock block the winner and everything that they do. So that's just American politics for you. I'm not the biggest fan of you know, the institution, as it were, but you know, it is what it is. It's. Do you think
your vote really does matter? Because I feel that nowadays they're more selected than they are elected. I don't even know if my vote matters. I'm in a red state, and I know Tomas is in a blue state, to where it's so overwhelmingly like it doesn't really matter which side you're going to be voting for,
unless everyone thinks that and then doesn't vote.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still going to vote because my vote, it feels good. Like, it's
Well, I mean, again, we're a show about UFOs and aliens in space, but you know, sure, a little bit of political opinion. I mean, the only thing I don't like is, you know, when you hear about gerrymandering and them sort of like trying to read, and both sides do it. So again, I don't give a shit whether you're Republican or Democrat. They both suck in terms of like trying to cheat the system. Like, if they don't get their way, they just try to rewrite the rules, and that's just something I've never been cool with, because, you know, like, we're baseball players. Like, you don't just get to be like, hey, I know I didn't hit the ball, those 3 opportunities that you gave me, those 3 strikes, so I'm going to go ahead and add a 4th strike. Can you just throw it? Can you throw it again? And it's like, no, bitch, that's why we have rules in the first place. Get out of here. Exactly. You know what I mean? It's like, you get another at bat once the lineup turns over. Yeah. Right? So that's kind of my 2 cents.
I think a lot of people feel that way about it, you know? It's like, people our generation, you know, younger kids, it's like, are these people really representing, you know, us and our sentiments? It just kind of feels like they're, you know, trying to divide and conquer while shaking hands up top, you know.
Mm-hmm. And we needed to shake it up, dude, because I mean, these why are we voting between 2 old ass dudes? Like, what do they really care about our future? Why can't we get some young blood in there that actually has some skin in the game, that actually cares about what America looks like 30, 50 years from now? Because these guys aren't going to be around. You know, we gotta mix it up.
I mean, by young, it's like, I'll take a dude in his 50s. Like, I'll take a middle-aged guy, you know what I mean?
Well, how old was JFK? Wasn't he like 35, or he was young, wasn't he? 45?
No, I think he was like maybe in his 40s. Yeah, I think
I know he was young. He was the youngest. I
want to say he was in his 40s. Yeah, I want to say he was in his 40s, which is, that's definitely young for a president. Yeah. I mean, even Obama was like, I think was like 55 or something, or in his 50s. I mean, I heard someone characterize the first debate between the two of them was watching 2 old grandpas play I Know You Are, But What Am I? Right? And it was just like, sad but true. Yeah. So,
it's embarrassing, to be honest.
It is. But the reason why we're doing the special edition is obviously, you know, the election's right around the corner. And one of the big things is a lot of the disclosure and the stuff that's been coming out. Mm-hmm. I mean, even recently, just the other day, it was like someone on Fox News was interviewing Trump and was like, are you going to look into UFOs? And this is like a few times he's been asked this, and he was like, or they asked him specifically about the UAP task force. Mm-hmm. And he said he would look into it and all this stuff. And people kind of went viral with that. And again, I listened to the whole interview. I don't think there's a whole lot there. But the reason why we wanted to touch on this was just because what kind of like power and information are the presidents actually privy to? And not all presidencies are created equal, right? Like some of the presidents in the past may have had information regarding this subject, this topic, but as you know, I know you did some research and stuff, and I've seen around. I think it's safe to say that more contemporary presidents, I don't think they're privy to the same information. I think even they are on a need-to-know basis. Which makes this really interesting.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, there is a long history of UFOs and alien conspiracies involving many of our presidents throughout history. It's been a hot topic for a long time, and it hasn't always been so stigmatized as it is today. It's a question that seems to be always asked of our president or presidential candidate. I mean, if I was friends with the POTUS, like if we're hanging out having beers, like, yo, aliens, what do you know? Like, that's gonna be my first question.
Isn't that like I know you're probably gonna touch on this, but that was like Clinton's first day in office. The two questions he asked: who shot JFK, and what happened in Roswell?
Yeah.
So you're not alone, dude.
You're never going to get that info. Yeah, of course I wasn't alone. I mean, a lot of people feel the same way. I mean, every president or former president that's gone on the Jimmy Kimmel Live is asked that same question. That's the first question he asks. And that's kind of where I wanted to start this episode off at. So, sure, Tomas, you want to start us off at Obama? I think it's a good one, a good place to start.
So this is something I feel like if I was the president, and it's unlikely that that is ever going to happen.
You never know.
If I was the president...
It was unlikely that I was going to be president.
The moment I was inaugurated, my hand would it'd still be hot from touching the Bible, and I would immediately race to wherever they have the files about Area 51 and the UFOs, and I'd go through everything to find out what happened.
Right.
Did you do that?
That's why you will not be president. Because that's the first thing that you would do. The aliens won't let it happen. You reveal all their secrets. They exercise strict control over us.
Now, there are a lot of people that are going to examine your facial expressions here, every twitch, everything, and say, and of course, so did you look? Did you see? Did you explore?
I can't reveal anything.
Oh, really? Because President Clinton said he did go right in, and he did check, and there was nothing.
Well, that's what we're instructed to say.
All right.
I miss that man. He's so fun just to watch and
Obama. So yeah, Jimmy, you're right. We are going to analyze his facial expression and everything that he says. Yeah, I've seen that clip before, and it is he's definitely like obviously being pretty flip about it and casting it aside, and everyone's having a good time. The thing that I think about this clip the most every time I see it is just I love that it's being asked in like a mainstream thing, and that Kimmel doesn't shy away from like what we all kind of would think. The only thing that kind of bugs me about it is that it sort of stokes the flames of casting this whole subject aside.
Yeah, because everyone laughs about it.
Right.
It's a joke.
And it's a safe, in that regard, it was like a safe question. Like Kimmel knew it was going to be like an easy snicker, an easy laugh to ask Obama. It's like a warm-up softball question, right? Because he's going to fucking dodge it. He's not going to like disclose it on Kimmel. So he's softballing the dude, and he nails it, and he gets people to sort of laugh, and it's like a charming thing. But it's like, it's cool that he's asking him, but the thing that always irks me is that it just sort of like sweeps it deeper under the rug for the people that really believe in this stuff, and makes it even more difficult to talk about in an open forum because people just think like you're just a joke, right? I mean, what do you think about it?
I agree with Kimmel. Like that would be the first thing I would do if I was president. I have no shame in that. And that might have been, who knows? Like, it's just interesting how he responded. Yeah, I mean, we are analyzing him. Like every little everything he says, the cadence in his voice, the truth behind what he says, he can't reveal that information. What information is there not to reveal then,
Right.
That's what gets me.
Because theoretically, you would imagine if you're the president and you go in and you look into this stuff, and you're stonewalled, right? Like you're told like you don't have access, or there's something that you get that's fishy about even the way they like try to divert you away from it, would sort of tip you off. Because I remember I believe it was during the Clinton administration, there's something that's going out there called the Wilson note, so the Wilson memo. And that was like an admiral who was like top secret clearance, who was like going through special access programs, and he hit the same Stonewall. And this dude had like top secret clearance during the Clinton administration. And you got to imagine, like, that's like the guy who would have told Clinton, right? So even like the act of like not telling the president and being sort of confrontational or pushing back on him is going to tip your hand. So even if Obama did do what we all think we would do, and he goes in and he starts like digging and asking these questions, and they push back on him, he can't reveal that either, though, right? Like I don't know, I don't remember when in his term that this clip was, but if he was relatively new in office, he's got like a long way to go, and he's got to keep his approval ratings high and all that type of stuff. So he can't just be in there like making enemies right away, right? So it's like you ask about UFOs, there's pushback, and you have to like walk it back, because you can't just go in there and piss off the CIA and the military and all these people like, day one. They're not going to have your back, dude. No. And that's how, you get toppled. So,
well, let's move on to the next one. I think the next on the Jimmy Kimmel Live is George W.
All right,
Dubs.
Let's see what the Dubs got to say.
We are back with President Bush. This is his book. It is called Portraits of Courage, and we will go through this and talk about some of the veterans who you painted and you wrote about. But first, I want to ask you, this is a question that I think is very important to me and very important to the country. When you were in office, and I don't know when this happened or if it happened, did you go through the secret files, the UFO documents? Because if I was president, that'd be the first thing I did.
It's funny. My daughters asked the very same question.
They did?
Yeah.
Would you be allowed to tell your daughters what was in those files?
No.
You would not?
No.
Now that you're out of office, you can do anything you want, right?
True, yeah. But I'm not telling you.
You're not telling You're not telling me what? Are you not telling me that you looked at them?
I'm not telling you nothing.
Are there really great secrets that you know that you can't share with people?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are. And you never write about them?
No.
Maybe at a time in your life that you're like, oh, I'm 90, I'm going to do it.
No.
No, nothing. What if you were to get like a little like loopy, you get old and...
Start drinking again?
Start drinking again. Guillermo, get some tequila.
Yeah. You want tequila?
That's one president I'd like to have a beer with.
Oh, dude. So I love that clip, because he's even in his denial. This is what I mean by like the idea of like even in the act of denial or being hush, like he admitted there's secrets that he can't reveal and stuff. And like we all know that these people know stuff. Again, like just for personal context, I work around the DC area, and I meet people that work in our federal government at all different branches and levels all the time, that will sort of, how should I say this, like approach the line of secrecy and kind of tip their hand and kind of tell me that this is the industry I work in. Here's some interesting things. And they'll let me know, kind of what Kimmel's doing. Like I'll ask them questions and they'll kind of let me know like, oh, I can't really talk about that, wink, wink, but you're asking the right questions. And that's what like stokes your flame. You're like, oh, fuck, man. Like, come on, just give me something,
And
I love
keep on being asked. That's why those questions will keep being asked.
And I do love George W. He's one of, again, I'm not, I'm not partial to one party or another. I was fortunate enough to hear him speak live out of office, like in a conference, like in a leadership conference thing. And
oh, cool.
He's as cool as they come, and he was very he was just very candid. I mean, people were asking him about 9/11 and all that stuff, and obviously he's not getting into like tactical information, but he was sort of disclosing a lot of like behind the scenes things that go into like his daily life as a president, like what he was doing when the towers came down and, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, the reason I bring that up is because he is a guy that he just seems like a dude you want to have a beer with.
Yeah.
And if there is a president or two that, in more contemporary terms, that would have an idea of what was going on with that, it would either be him or his dad.
Yeah.
Because his dad was the head of the CIA for a little bit, was vice president for 2 terms under Reagan, and then was his own presidency. And both these guys were beloved by the military and intelligence industries. So if anybody did have access, like anyone would have a beer with this guy and spill some secrets, it would be the Bushes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think his dad took some pretty big secrets to the grave with him. He was pretty mum when it comes to this kind of stuff. I thought it was interesting that in that interview when he asked George W. about the Area 51 files, and he said, I can't tell you about what's in those files. Like, what's so secret about those files if it was just a weather balloon?
Right.
It's definitely something, and we all kind of know what it is.
So
there's no beating around the bush. No pun intended.
That's a great pun intended.
Thank you.
I saw a recent article about a picture that was taken like several years back, or several decades back, of 2 hikers hiking in Scotland that apparently came across like a UFO and snapped a very like direct, clear photo of a UFO, and I think maybe like a jet coming to like intercept it, and it was like clear evidence. And they gave the pictures to a journalist to post, and the moronic journalist, because I want to say this was like 30 years ago, trusted the government, so he like sent the government the photos and the negatives to either like verify the story or something like that.
And they're gone.
And the Scottish government kept it and classified it. Okay. And the reason why this article came up recently was because it recently came up like in January. It was going to be like up for like declassification, like no longer, deemed secretive or whatever. And they went ahead and recertified it classified for like the next like 75 years.
Oh, wow.
And so it just like you asked right now, it's like
serious. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, so like a pedestrian takes a picture of a UFO out on a hike and you deem it like a national security issue and basically classify it for the next 100 years, when you combine the last 25 with the next 75. That's what I mean by like evidence in the denial. And like skeptics would be like, oh, you can't look into stuff like that. Fuck that. Yeah, we can. Dude, like what's it? If it's nothing, just let it be, right? The truth shall set you free, right? Let us see it, and we'll be the judge. But obviously, you're chicken shit. I can't. I hate the whole like need to know like national security type stuff when they like pull it out. Like I get it, dude. Like you don't want it out, but just let us take a peek. Just let us take a peek.
It'd be nice. I mean, it would be nice, but it's not going to happen. I think that you hit the nail on the head earlier when you mentioned. I don't think these presidents are privy either to the majority of this information because they are temporary officials. They're not going to be in office long enough. It's all the career administration that's going to be privy to this information. I don't even know if it's even part of our government anymore. I think it's so compartmentalized that it's kind of created a life
there's
of its
definitely
own.
a lot of research, and like we talked about with like Lazar and all these different things, is that I definitely think that it's been hidden in it's been passed over to private defense contractors are probably who have it. But those defense contractors work hand in hand with appointed officials in the government. So the government, like your Congress people, your senators, like your elected officials, they come and go. So there are, super secretive things that they probably are on a need to know basis. But like, career 30, 40 year, 4-star generals, they're not going anywhere. Right. So like those are the guys when we talk about like the government, and I just did air quotes on a podcast, that's quote unquote government. Yeah. I realize you can't see me. When we're talking about the government, I think like as an institution, you're talking about these like lifers, right? And that's why like a senator, like Harry Reid and these, I know people complain a lot about term limits with senators and stuff, but that's why some of these senators are sitting senators for like 30 years on like these like intelligence committees and stuff. Sometimes that's why they're more knowledgeable and credible as like disclosure witnesses and leak sources than the presidents, because the presidents are like very famously only going to be there for a max of 8 years possible.
Yeah, well, let's move on to this next one. It's you mentioned him earlier. It's George Clinton, and I believe this interview
George Clinton and the Parliament Funks.
Bill Clinton. I bet you George knows a thing or two about UFOs.
No, George Clinton and the P-Funks were on Kimmel, dude. Ask about, those guys. Have you ever seen them perform live?
Yeah.
They
look
in
like
spaceships,
aliens.
bro. Yeah, dude. That's a nice little Freudian slip there, bro.
Let's go to Billiam. Billiam Clinton here. I believe it's after his presidency on Jimmy Kimmel.
If you saw that there were aliens there, would you tell us?
Yeah.
You would? Oh, you're trying to give me a hint that there are aliens.
No, I'm trying to tell you I don't know.
Oh.
But if we were visited someday, I wouldn't be surprised. I just hope that it's not like Independence Day.
Yeah, right.
President Clinton said that he had his aides research Area 51 even and review papers on the rumored UFO sighting in Roswell, New Mexico. And he also fessed up that most of the time, he really doesn't miss the White House.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That was the best clip I could find. It wasn't on YouTube. That was like a random website there.
So he's obviously a lot more like loose with it, but there's a reason why I feel like the Democrats are more loose with it, and Bush was a lot more like straightforward, like, I'm not going to tell you shit, right?
Yeah.
It's because most military, law enforcement, people like that, vote Republican.
Yep.
Okay, so there's a lot of people that think that Republican presidents tend to be more privy to military like secrets and stuff like that because that's who they're voted for. Like there's a deeper connection to them as a commander in chief because A, they probably voted for you, but B, Republicans are seen as like the pro-military party. And there's always like deep connections, right? Like I said, George Bush being the head of the intelligence, the CIA, presidents back in the day, like Eisenhower was like, like a 5-star general and stuff. And, that just, with Democrats, you don't tend to see that as much. They don't have the military experience. They're more civilian career politicians. So that's why I think he's being a little more loose with it. I like that he's rocking the green tie of all colors.
I genuinely believe him that he doesn't know shit. I don't think they told him anything. And when George Bush is asked the question, he says, "I'm not telling you nothing. It's I just can't say it. I've seen it. It's classified information. I'm not going to tell you." George's like, "Yeah, they didn't tell me anything. I tried, but they won't tell me."
Yeah.
Bill, God damn.
I got George Clinton on the mind.
Yeah, I need to play that.
You better go get the funk out, dude.
Yeah, I do.
Bill has said he's been asked this a lot of times.
Yeah.
And he's never changed his tune. He said the same thing every time. Like I said, it was day one in office, and I believe John. I want to say John Podesta. I know John Podesta was part of Obama's campaign, but I think he's also part of the Clinton campaign, and he appears a lot. But John Podesta was, I want to say, God, it's all blurring together, but he was like the chief of staff or something for them. So Clinton sent his chief of staff and to go look who shot Kennedy and what happened in Roswell.
I gotta get that info.
Right. He was just fed the same story as like, and I believe that even presidents along the way have actually tried to open up the investigation again. Like, I want to say, like, not long ago, I want to say it was either Clinton or
there was
Jimmy
information
Carter.
released. I don't think that the investigation was reopened, but
no,
they
but like the Air Force,
information.
It was like the anniversary of Roswell. And so, like, I want to say it was Clinton or something, made just to kind of appease people, made the Air Force sort of like open it up, take a second look at it, and then it was just like a real quick thing that was like, the initial investigation was accurate, and then it was just kind of put to bed.
Yeah, which makes it interesting. While that was a point for Hillary Clinton's campaign was I'm gonna find out. It's like they didn't tell your husband. Why the hell how the hell are you gonna find out?
Well, this is, and I know she was on Kimmel as well. Yeah. So if you got that clip coming up, but also
I didn't cue that one up. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't think it was worthy. She never became president, so she's not part of this episode.
Who gives a shit about her? Poor Hillary.
Sorry, Hillary.
And her emails are somewhere in a corner.
I voted for you.
So she talks about aliens as well, but it's funny that you mentioned that because she said, if I'm, president, I'll look into it again. And even Trump has been talking about aliens recently in an election year. And I think it's funny that for something that is so like, tinfoil hat conspiracy, laugh it off, make fun of people that believe in this stuff. Well, obviously it's coming out and the Pentagon says that these UFOs are real. I think it's interesting that this is turning into like a topic that, like, a thing that people run on. Like, if you vote for me, I'll be the president of disclosure. Because Jimmy Carter,
the same way,
did the same thing. Yeah. I know Reagan was a believer. So pretty much like the last 5 or 6 presidents have talked about this openly. And it's interesting to me that it's like, sure, it's one thing to ask them after the fact.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that the question is now getting asked before they're even president, right? It's like a debate question. It's like, what would your COVID response be? How would you handle the economy? Will you look into UFOs? And that's kind of cool that that it's getting that kind of like limelight, those questions, because that wouldn't have happened like 30 years ago.
Because it was open. They talked about it like 30 years ago. They talked about it more like realistically. I mean, like Project Blue Book was a publicly known project that was investigating this phenomenon because it was a real phenomenon. These presidents would just casually talk about this. I mean, Truman was questioned and talked about it. He's like, yeah, we have a program and flying saucers, they're everywhere. They happen and we're investigating them. Like,
but some of it runs the course and feels like appeasement. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, the public is kind of interested in this. I want votes, so I'll just appease them by looking into it.
Do you think that's why they use it though? Because I mean, it's because it's such a taboo subject. I don't know. That could hurt their campaign as well.
But that's what I'm saying is when they're normally talking about this stuff, they're already in office.
Yeah,
the elections happened. They won. They're the president. Or Clinton and Bush, it sounds like that was post-presidency, right? Like, I think the big thing with Obama was he was the first one to go on the late night talk shows as a sitting president. But normally before his administration, the presidents didn't bother doing those kinds of like shows.
Well, Hillary did, and then Jimmy Carter did. I mean, Jimmy Carter had an experience where he witnessed a UFO, and it wasn't too exciting. I think there was like 30 witnesses or a dozen witnesses or so. A couple years before he was governor of Georgia, I believe. And it was just, they saw a light in the sky and it changed a couple different colors before it disappeared out of sight. But it set him, it struck a chord with him, and that was part of his campaign. Like he promised the American people, I will dig into Roswell and get this information for you. And then when he became president, he walked it back because of defense implications. And so that's kind of a telltale sign, like, okay, it's kind of interesting.
But you're kind of proving my point. Is what I just said is, like, all these conversations and these clips you're playing, other than Obama, all those people were asked these questions after their presidency, meaning they were not up for re-election. They'd already been president. That's a total different weighted question than when you ask someone who is running for president, who is seeking election, because if it's still deemed taboo when you are asked that question, if you say, like, yeah, I'm a believer, there's people that are like, this guy's nuts, right? There's people that think it's a joke. And then there's people that really want to know. So, people are a lot of, when it comes to voting, there's a lot of what we call single issue voters. So I may not agree with everything that this guy stands for, but if he's going to cut taxes and I'm going to make more money, then I'm going to vote for him as just like out of like a selfish thing, right? And I don't mean selfish in like a negative way. I just mean like that's the issue you care about for yourself, is like, I'm going to benefit from this guy, one part of this guy's plan. So if you're a single issue voter and, the person's single issue that you're interested in is whether or not they're going to tell you UFOs are real, that's kind of cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think Jimmy Carter was the first one to sort of say that on the campaign trail. Yeah. But Jimmy Carter was a single-term president, and he was not like a super like well-loved president in terms of like, he wasn't reelected for a reason, obviously, but also like he didn't really do a whole lot. And I just wonder how much of it was because people didn't kind of take him serious, or he was perceived as like soft or whatever. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's what I was saying about like the difference between being in office already and talking about this and talking about it before you're in office.
I gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
So who's next?
I was actually going to move on to George H.W. Bush. Before the Clinton administration, he was in office, and during a actually, this happened while he was helping his other son, Jeb. They're actually pushing him to be president before W. Before W, actually.
Jeb's like the slow one that, like, hold on,
he just wasn't as popular. I don't want to have a beer with Jeb. I want to have a beer with George.
Wait for me, guys. I can't run as fast. I'm going to be the governor of Florida.
Jeez.
And I'll cheat with a hanging chads and make sure my brother wins. I'm Jeb.
All right, that's a character I think we're going to have to bring back.
Let's be real, dude. Like, okay, I don't have a brother growing up, but like if I had a brother and my brother was named after our father, and then like George H.W. Bush, and then his name was George W. Bush, and I got Jeb for a name, I'm not sure if it's a family name or where it came from, but like, you know who the favorite is.
And George is such a fuck up too, and he was the one that became the president.
He was snorting coke and like a C student at Yale. Remember the whole thing in his administration? They were like, remember back when scandalous with presidents meant like it was like George W. Bush got a C on his report card.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh shit, he got a C in like, I don't know, fucking geology or world history, and it's like, and the whole the defense was a C at Yale is equivalent to like an A in public school or some shit, right? That they were like, and it was like, no, that's not how it works. A C is a C, dude.
Yeah. Well, anyways, sorry, Jeb.
Doing coke,
sorry that we just rained on your parade right there. I don't want to put you down too much.
Come on, guys. Dad, I want to be president one day.
But his father, George Sr., was helping him campaign, and during a fundraiser, I believe it was in Florida, actually, one of the questions that was asked was, when is the government going to tell us the truth about UFOs? And George Sr. replied with, Americans can't handle the truth, before the event coordinators stopped questioning. A lot of people say that he was I think he was 91, so they said that his mental health wasn't all there, but I think that that solidifies his answer a little bit more because he doesn't give a fuck. I mean, he was the president of the United States for 2 terms. He was the vice president of the United States for 2 terms, and he was the director of the CIA for a year, I believe. That dude knows some shit.
Yeah, he was a 1-term president, though. I don't think
he was 1 term. I think he was 2. Yeah. He was 1.
2 terms vice president, 1-term president, and then he was the head of the CIA. Right? Correct me if I'm wrong. But
Tomas, check it. Look it up.
I'm pretty sure because that's how Clinton got in. I think he ran against Clinton. But no, you're right. You know what I love is whenever people have these like old, I don't know, you could call them semi-deathbed confessions. Everybody's just like, oh, they're old and senile or whatever. And it's like, sure, I guess you obviously when you get older, your faculties go a little bit. But, they say the same stuff about like Buzz Aldrin and all these guys. And it's like, I don't know, man. I mean, I've never met like a 90-year-old person that a 90-year-old person might get a little racist or a little like politically incorrect, or they may not care about social norms as much, but they don't just tend to like make up shit out of the blue unless they're like institutionalized. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I don't think he was ever like, known to have like dementia or Alzheimer's. I could be wrong. I'm not a presidential documentarian or biographer, but from what I remember, he was pretty with it for a while. And again, he was just a super beloved president. So like if he's remembering people's birthdays and all that stuff, I just don't see him like randomly making up stuff. But maybe he was just doing his best Jack Nicholson from A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. You want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. It's like, that's what I mean by like these Republican presidents that have that military background and stuff. These guys are like rock solid people their whole lives, and I can't stand when people just like dismiss their whole thing and just be like, oh well, he was just getting older and up there in age or whatever. And it's like, they don't tend to just lie. You don't just become a liar because you're old. You still have the same character and integrity. And to be honest, if you were going to tell a lie, if you were just lying, wouldn't you have a more evasive answer than what you just said? Like, the American people can't handle the truth. That sounds like a pretty well put together answer. Yeah. Right? It's not like he spilled the secrets and was like, yeah, they're all out at Area 51. It's like, oh, he's crazy. Don't listen to him. Wheel him away. He gave a pretty that's a pretty solid answer for a 91-year-old person that doesn't want to spill the secrets,
It's grumpy and bitter, like I think I'll probably be when I'm 91.
I'm already grumpy and bitter.
Come on, Dad, tell me if UFOs are real.
Tell me a story.
Go back in the shit.
I mean, before that, when he was campaigning, he was asked that question, and I think twice before, and he said, I quote, I'm very careful with what I say about classified information in public. And so if he's very careful with what he says publicly, and then those are the only few things I could find on him and Aliens. And for him to come out when he's 91, not giving a fuck, American people can't handle the truth, coming from a former CIA director. And was he in the Navy or Army? Like he had a military background, right?
Yeah, dude. I mean, the Bushes are like...
They're Freemasons. Like, they're well connected.
They're like red, white, and blue. Like, they should be... They're on, like, America posters. You know what I mean? It's like, when you look at... He had, like, the Navy Cross for, like, accommodation. And, like, I looked up, his history. Because I didn't realize he was a 2-term vice president. That was news to me. You brought that to my attention. And I just sort of looked at his whole history because I just thought they were like oil tycoons from Texas. I didn't realize like how deep the military stuff ran. I mean, they had super decorated history. So again, regardless of what you feel about, Republicans or whatever, they're a decorated family. And again, we're focusing on their how they relate to UFOs and stuff. Dude, they know, like I said, I think it was like him and like Richard Nixon. I think Nixon was probably the last like real president that was like privy to this information.
Yeah, and we'll get to Nixon. I wanted to hit Ronald Reagan right before we get there. I'm kind of wanting to go
right. Yeah,
go in
You're hitting all the
here.
Republicans. I'm telling you, it's all the red presidents.
They got the good stuff, dude. They got the good stuff. So before Bush Sr. was president, he was vice president for Ronald Reagan. Now Reagan was a fan of science fiction, as he was a former Hollywood actor before he got into politics, but he had a UFO sighting of his own and was very outspoken about it. While he was governor of California in 1974, he witnessed a UFO while flying over Bakersfield, California. Supposedly, it was a ball of light that seemingly was within several hundred yards of their small plane, traveling at a steady rate before it elongated and then shot up 45 degrees, like straight up. And he was very outspoken about it. Even as president, he talked about UFOs and aliens a lot and discussed it in private and in public forums, including the UN. And I found a smash cut of 3 different times he brings this up, and I thought we should give it a listen and discuss it.
I couldn't help at one point in my discussions privately with General Secretary Gorbachev, when you stop to think that we're all God's children, wherever we may live in the world, I couldn't help but say to him, just think how easy his task and mine might be in these meetings that we held if suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species, from another planet, outside in the universe. We'd forget all the little local differences that we have between our countries, and we would find out once and for all that we really are all human beings here on this earth together. Well, I don't suppose we can wait for some alien race to come down and threaten us, but I think that between us we can bring about that realization. In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bond. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war? I think maybe I'd answer it this way. I keep, in my frustration sometimes, actually, if you count some of the things going on in smaller countries and all, there have been about 114 wars since World War II. But I've often wondered, what if all of us in the world discovered that we were threatened by a power from outer space, from another planet? Wouldn't we all of a sudden find that we didn't have any differences between us at all? We were all human beings, citizens of the world, and wouldn't we come together to fight that particular threat?
So
fuck yeah, Gipper.
So I agree with the dude, man. I think that would be really good for humanity in a way, because it would unite us and we wouldn't have all these fucking differences. Bring us all together as one human, not different colors, like this racial injustice that we're dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, it's the premise to Independence Day in a nutshell, right? Like, all the countries have to band together. Of course, it's the United States of America that comes up with the way to defeat them.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. USA. USA. But no, I mean, what's interesting about that is, so he had that encounter that you talked about. It was also it's also mentioned that he had a secondary encounter.
Really? I don't think I saw this one.
Yeah, so he had a secondary encounter. It was said that he was driving to a party in the Hollywood Hills to a famous director's house. And it was him and his, I think it was Nancy, his wife, and that they were driving, and supposedly they saw a ball of light land off in the trees. And Reagan wanted to pull over and investigate it. And I don't think Nancy wanted him to. But he did, and supposedly they ended up showing up like 2 hours late to this party. So there was a lot of like lost time, and when they did show up, they were like fighting and arguing, and could be, sort of, it was overheard that like Nancy was upset that, that he had like stopped to look at this thing, but like they didn't know where the time went. To them, they thought it was like they pulled over and then went. So again, not a ton of like evidence with that story, but that story's out there, so I at least wanted to share that. But the interesting thing about those speeches is clearly 3 different speeches. I mean, he mentions it in the UN speech, which I think is the most notable one that people talk about. But if you just like stop to think about like presidents and their speeches for a minute, like every word that comes out of a president's mouth is particularly like curated. Like they have people that are writing speeches and analyzing with a fine-tooth comb every word that they say, because they're pretty much always on record, right? They're always being mic'd. They're always on camera. And when you say stuff, it's generally, it can have great consequences on the, the economy. You can start wars. Like your rhetoric means something. Donald Trump, Twitter. That means something, whether you think it or not. When the president speaks, Absolutely. It means a lot. So to have him talk about aliens the way he is 3 different times, A, lets you know that he's such a believer that he's saying it. B, how many people must he have sort of convinced or ignored or like overruled? Because there's people in his campaign or in his staff that are like, yo, Ronald, maybe you should take it easy on the alien talk. And then he's also, don't forget, the president that started the whole idea of the Star Wars global defense. Tony Stark, Age of Ultron, Avengers 2 premise as like the global defense system. Right.
They called it Star Wars, right?
He called it Star Wars. Yeah. He literally called it Star Wars, right? But the other thing is he's talking about Gorbachev, and as we've learned in our, UFO research, and if you're watching these documentaries and stuff, it's very well documented that UFOs were hyper interested in, and sightings occur over nuclear facilities. And during Reagan's term, I mean, he's the whole Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall. Like he ended the Cold War, with the famous wall coming down. I think that was like in the late 80s, 88 or 89. But he's talking about calling Gorbachev in the middle of the Cold War, having discussions about aliens.
Yeah, no, it was 1985, the Geneva summit. Like it was the 2 of them. They separated themselves from the group, and it was just them and their translators. And that was supposedly when they had a little walk and talk with Gorbachev, and I asked him, "Hey, if we were ever invaded from up above, would you got our backs?" He's like, "Yeah, of course."
Would you come get our backs, right?
Yeah, and like, yeah, we get yours too. But it's just interesting in like a professional forum to ask that of another country.
But there was there's also well-documented policies that the U.S. was in contact with Russia over these UFOs invading military installations and turning nuclear weapons on. That was like, yo, if a UFO is over there turning on your missiles, you better let us know that it's a UFO and not you or something, because if we start to see your missiles come online, ours are going to come online.
I mean, it almost started a nuclear war.
Yeah, it would have been World War III.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting that there's like these 3 different sort of like, we're in conversation with Russia. He said that in, wherever you dug that information up in somewhat of a private forum. And then,
he mentioned that in one of those speeches that we listened to. I mean, it's openly talked about.
Yeah. And so, but I mean, like the original conversation between him and Gorbachev was a private conversation. Yes. So that's just another, the point I'm trying to make is tallying how many times does Reagan bring up the alien metaphor, right? And maybe that was his original, whether he's a believer or maybe that was like the original, what if that was like an attempt at soft disclosure, right? Like, what if they were just testing the waters of like, what if the president mentioned aliens a few times, and then you know how they run out and they poll the public about everything, like, you know, like, what did you think about Reagan's speech at the UN? And if people are like, I think he's batshit crazy talking about aliens, they're like, all right, stop talking about aliens. People aren't ready. But if they're like, oh yeah, I like what he said and this and that, and they're like, well, what'd you think about the alien thing? Oh, that was cool. That's a great sentiment. Yeah, we are humans, and let's kumbaya. And
it was a nice what if. I wonder if he got away with it more because he is a former Hollywood actor, so he's a little bit more creative when it comes to his imagination.
It's his. Well, he's a Hollywood actor, but he also like. Reagan had one of the highest approval ratings of like any president. So he was a very beloved president. And people got to remember, like back in the day, like even George Bush Sr., Reagan, Republicans were not nearly as right-wing conservative as they are today. Okay. So like presidents, this is how presidents used to be. Whether you would run in the primary as more conservative, and Democrats would run as more liberal. And then once you're elected, they all sort of come back to the center to lead the majority of us. And that's where like the approval ratings and things like that come in, because the only thing that really made him a true like conservative was that he was a fiscal conservative and he created trickle down economics. Okay. So like, that's why he was super beloved. But in a lot of policies, like I remember there's a clip of him in, I think it's Bush and whoever was running against him, like Bob Dole back in the primaries for the Republican nomination. They're talking about immigration and stuff. And it's like the Republicans are the ones who are like, we need to reach out and extend a hand and be friendly and considerate to our brothers and sisters down in Mexico. And they're very like superhuman. It's like the stuff that you hear Democrats saying today. And then the reason I'm just painting this picture is because I think today it's easy to be like Republicans suck or Democrats suck. Like we're all super polarized that we forget these presidents back in the day, like Reagan and stuff. They were more of a popular president than you think. Just because he was a Republican, had an R next to his name, doesn't mean he was like a jerk or like super right wing. He was really trying to be more unifying than what we see in politics today. So I'm just giving a little history lesson there.
Yeah, now it's so radical left or radical right, and it's just, I'm so tired and embarrassed of the American democracy. It's such a shit show.
Right. So Reagan is a super interesting one because, like I said, of the two witnesses, clearly he's a believer.
Yeah.
Like I said, a president is not going to be allowed to walk out there and go on record, especially 3 times. Because if you did it once and there was bad pushback, someone would have been like, dude, you can't go out there and say this again. Right. And he clearly got away with it. And it was obviously working because presidents also don't say things that don't work. Right. Like if he goes out and says something and there's totally like harsh pushback, he's not going to bring it up again. Right. Yeah. So the thing is, not only is he saying it, but what that tells me is in the 80s, the public was somewhat like open-minded to it and digesting it because, again, he wouldn't have brought it up on such a public forum several more times.
Yeah. Completely agree.
So
very interesting.
So who's next? Who else you got?
Now we're getting to your Nixon. We're getting old Dick Richard coming on up. And he actually has one of my favorite stories that I was able to dig up. So Richard Nixon was really good friends with Jackie Gleason, who was a famous actor. He had his own like comedy sketch show, and they used to golf together all the time. And Jackie used to be really known for being in the paranormal and UFOs. And I'm sure he joked with good old Dick there on the golf course, like, "Hey man, so what do you know about aliens?" And supposedly one day, limo pulled up to his house, picked him up. And it was Richard, and he was like, "Hey man, get in the car. I'm gonna make your dreams come true." And he drove him out to an airbase, military airbase, showed him alien artifacts, pieces of a crashed UFO, and a dead alien body. And so this story was leaked through, I believe, Jackie's second ex-wife, something along those lines, but it was a couple years before his death. and it was never denied nor confirmed. There's a reason why these kind of stories come out, and it's just a fun one. It's more of like an urban legend, but it was one that was printed. I think it was in the National Esquire, so that doesn't help its cause. But it was printed. She was the writer. His actual ex-wife was given the credit for the writing of it.
Right. So the National Enquirer, there's a couple things there. The National Enquirer does post sensational things, but I remember hearing someone interviewing like some anonymous source about aliens and, disclosure and all of this stuff. And, there was some comment along the way, and I'm totally paraphrasing this. It was some comment along the way, like, if you want to know the truth, read that stuff. And the guy pointed to the tabloid, like the National Enquirer stuff. And it was like, that's where the truth is. Now, I'm not saying that I believe all that. I'm just saying that that's, it's funny because, that story, I've heard that story as well. But when it appears there, that's part of the disinformation campaign, right?
Absolutely.
Like, they could be telling you the truth straight to your face, and the truth is so fantastical that that can't be real. Well, and then when they have a picture of like, oh, and by the way, Bat Boy exists, and there's some like terribly photoshopped like
he's real. Bat Boy is real.
Bat Boy.
Accept it.
It always happens in Florida too, by the way. I don't know.
It's always Florida. Like, I think that was a Florida air base. I'm not gonna lie.
It was down by Miami. Yeah. I forget what the name of that base is, but it's at the southern tip of Florida, and they were playing golf. Gleason mentioned he was into UFOs and stuff. So the thing with that story is, because I think this appeared in like Ancient Aliens or something like that. I forget where I've seen it, but the key thing about that was like, I think that it did happen, and in my opinion, I think this was the turning point where
absolutely, yeah.
So Nixon like ditched his Secret Service detail and drove the car himself and all that stuff, and drove on the base, and then showed Gleason, and it was reported that everything that you said was true, and then took Gleason back, and it was like Gleason basically like self-quarantined for like a week that he was so distraught and disturbed by what he said, like this is like a happy-go-lucky TV personality, and he like couldn't go out in public, and he had to wrap his head around it, right? And in my opinion, what I think about this is that I think this was like the beginning of the end of allowing the presidents in on this stuff, because Nixon, again, was a Republican president, very pro-military, pro-war. But when you do that kind of stuff, you're elected official and you do that kind of stuff, that's somewhat of an abuse of power. And I think they started to realize, like, hey, maybe presidents can't be trusted as much as like us career military people, because you can't be threatened, you can't be influenced, right? Like if you're a career military person and you ask about UFOs, you hear it all the time that like someone's supervisor was like, if you ever ask me that again, you're never going to get promoted. You're going to have to be forced into retirement. There's way more like weight that can be brought down on you. As a president, there's really not a whole lot they can do. I mean, what are they going to do? Just like, you're not going to get reelected?
They could kill you.
Oh, I know what's coming up next.
I mean, you know who's next. You said with Nixon, you think it was the beginning of an end. I think it was the end, and I think the beginning of the end started at JFK.
Touche.
There's a lot of conspiracy on JFK, and we'll just kind of do some quick hits with this one, because I mean, I know you and I could both rattle off a ton of stuff about this conspiracy, because it's just riddled with just questions and holes. And so this brings us to JFK, and the way he died is just, no one can explain it. That's why everyone keeps talking about, I'm gonna research, I'm gonna look into what happened with JFK, and there's reason for that. And I believe that he was going to let the American people know what's going on with either, the Majestic 12 or aliens, what they know. He was going to leak some secrets, and that ultimately led to his death, because the way he died, the way he was assassinated, it just doesn't add up. And then the guy that supposedly killed him was murdered within 2 days, just to shut him up. And then his brother, who's running for the presidency, who's gonna definitely look into that, he gets murdered. There's just too many puzzle pieces that just drive you crazy. So that
So JFK was notoriously he was somewhat anti-CIA.
Yeah.
So whether he was going to disclose UFOs are real, and that's the reason that he was sort of put down, or just the CIA or the intelligence apparatus as a whole was just sort of making CYA. They're covering their own ass. They want to make sure that they still have jobs. They want to stay in control. Knowledge is power, right? So intelligence is the most powerful thing that you can have out there. So I agree. I mean, the reason why the JFK assassination is so conspiracy swirl, just like the moon landing and stuff, because it was so freaking public. But as you know, he's having these grievances before he's even up there. Supposedly he had ties to the mob. He had the Marilyn Monroe thing going on. He was a very celebrity president. He was also, I believe, if the story, if I'm accurate with this, he was also the first president to appear on camera. So what? It was long believed. Yeah, they did like a debate. And that was one of the first times, presidents didn't used to appear on film.
Well, I mean, I have queued up Dwight D. Eisenhower speech, his farewell speech.
Sure, but but he's in terms of the debate and the election and stuff, is when television became more. What you're probably going to show of Eisenhower is they didn't broadcast that probably on television. They probably broadcast that via radio. And then maybe the production came out later. I'm talking about live broadcast television. It was Kennedy versus...
Maybe it was the first live debate. Maybe it was the first live debate.
It was versus Nixon, and Nixon was sweating, and he looked terrible on camera. And you had Kennedy, he was young, and he looked kind of handsome, and people liked him. So he was a charming celebrity type person, not, like I've been saying, not your typical militaristic... serving in the military, commander-in-chief. So he probably didn't have a lot of friends because of that. Then he starts beefing with the CIA. But the biggest thing for me is, again, I just always look at the human. When in doubt, you want to follow money. Tigers don't change their stripes. So whenever things are weird, you just got to look at the people. And like you said, Lee Harvey Oswald shoots this guy, shoots the president. And then he's killed immediately by Jack Ruby, this random restaurant owner that supposedly had strip club owner, who also had ties to the mob and stuff like that. And supposedly his reason for killing him was he just didn't want Jackie Kennedy to bear the the emotional burden of this or whatever. Dude, nobody cares about.
He just either wanted to make a name for himself within the mob, or he owed a serious debt. Or he was brainwashed. I mean, there's so many rabbit holes you could go down.
Dude, yeah. I mean, you can dig in. That's its own episode, right? But it's the point is, Lee Harvey Oswald was clearly...
He did not act
alone. It was clearly shut up, right? Yeah, whoever the grassy knoll was and all that stuff. Again, we're not breaking down that shit in an episode. But what I'm saying is, Lee Harvey Oswald was clearly... Either if he was the guy that shot him or he was just a pawn, he was clearly shut up and silenced. Right? It was in front of everybody. You don't in today's day and age, you would not assassinate the president and be killed immediately unless you were shooting it out.
Well, the thing is, you wouldn't even have an opportunity to, and that's what's so interesting about how JFK died. If you're going to be going down the street in a convertible vehicle with 5-story building and open windows, Secret Service goes through and sweeps that shit. That's protocol. And for that,
they definitely do now slip, after Kennedy, for sure.
For that to slip, I mean, they should be doing that shit since Abraham. Right. That was always protocol, and so for it to slip through the seams there, it's just very. It doesn't feel right,
Well, when you watch documentaries, I mean, I watched Dr. Stephen Greer. I mean, some of these people are completely convinced it was because of the, this topic, the alien and UFO topic.
I don't know if this is exactly it, but I mean, this is a show about aliens, so that's the conclusion we're going to come to.
Well, and again, conspiracies are conspiracies. But some conspiracies hold more weight than others, and Kennedy was clearly assassinated for a reason. I mean, Lee Harvey Oswald, there's a lot of stuff about him, like being
connected
a Russian
to Cuba.
agent.
I think Russia.
Well, yeah. Well,
yeah. I think it's Russia.
The whole thing with Cuba is Russia, right? Yeah. So he was at the Russian embassy, like in Mexico or something, and then he was in Cuba. But like the thing is, we also had. Have you ever heard of something called a double agent, where we would easily train CIA operatives to be Russian agents and infiltrate Russian, like that's why the CIA, they're just stars on a wall when people are killed in action. You don't know their names and you don't know what they were doing because they're doing some deep ass shit that you and I and the average person, if we knew what they were doing, we probably wouldn't get out of bed every day because we'd be like, damn, that's what these guys are like preventing from happening. Yeah. So anyway, the point is I always believe in the human. I listen to the human. What are the human beings telling me, and what are the behaviors, and that's what sort of like gets me going. It's like, I know people want evidence, but sometimes there's not a ton of evidence. Like especially back then when not everything was traced and tracked, there wasn't cameras everywhere. It was easier to do this kind of stuff back then. So what do we have? We just have people and we have a timeline and something doesn't add up. Something's fishy about it.
Exactly. And that's why people always want to dig into it. And that's why it's a conspiracy. And it's one of the, probably the biggest American conspiracy of all time. And it'll hopefully forever be the biggest. We'll never know the answers to that one.
Well, they have documents, just like I said earlier about the Scottish there's documents about JFK, but those are the types of documents that may never see the light of day because they continually get classified as like whatever top secret. And it's like, this happened a long time ago, dude. What's in there that they don't want people to know? You know what I mean? Or what's in there that's even... It's not even like they might have the answer in there because there might not be an answer, but there might be some new information in there that people would start. It would start the whole investigation again, and they just don't even want you to like ask the questions, which is why I always look at the human thing is like, if you're asking questions and people are telling you to stop, you're on the right track.
Exactly.
It's like poker. You know what I mean?
You are 100% correct, and I'm gonna get us back on track here because, like we said, we can talk about this one for several hours. Yeah. So I'm gonna move on to our next president, who I think is the most interesting case, and that's our 34th president, Dwight D. Eisenhower, good old Ike. And what makes him the most interesting is that he was in power and had access to this stuff in like the golden years of UFOs. Like he was a 5-star general, like you said. He was, I believe he was a vice president and he was a president for 2 terms. And during the like golden age of all this stuff going on, I mean, he was a general under the Truman administration during the Roswell incident. And there's a lot of urban legends surrounding that and several summits that he held with aliens. And we kind of touched a little bit of those urban legends with Valiant Thor. And that's what makes it so fun and intriguing is like so he was supposedly on a golf trip vacation and that was interrupted
in California.
And that was interrupted to supposedly meet with 2 extraterrestrials. And he told that like his administration said he had an emergency dental appointment, and there's never been any evidence or records of that dental trip, which just feeds into the conspiracy, because this is the thing is these ideas and these urban legends are so crazy and out there. It kind of makes it like, well, maybe that makes it more believable to me, like how can you make up a story that wild? Because
he's like a straight up war hero.
Yeah.
Like there's only like 3, again, I was researching this. I believe there's only like 3 5-star generals in American history. And it was like him and like Douglas MacArthur, like even George S. Patton was only a 4-star general. And there's only a certain number of those. So like you're talking about like World War II straight up heroes. These guys beat Hitler and the Nazis. Okay, that's who Dwight D. Eisenhower is, and he's not really like, I think in terms of integrity, he's probably the most, you would assume that these guys are not liars, they're not fibbers, right? And that thing you're telling about, the story you're talking about, was he disappeared off the radar, which presidents don't do. You don't lose track of the president for 48 hours. Unless there's something secretive going on, right? Like the presidents fly around on Air Force One and with like a whole press corps and like all these different staff people, and they just don't really get alone time. And even if they do get alone time, it's scheduled.
And that's why why these stories hold so much water. And
where'd you go? What'd you do?
I had chipped a tooth on a chicken bone. I gotta fix that. All right.
So why would you have such a ridiculous explanation for where you went if the thing that you were actually doing wasn't also ridiculous?
With the detail because they said it was actually a chicken bone meal, is what his administration said. Oh, he chipped a tooth on a chicken bone meal. What kind of detail?
Right.
You need that detail. I chipped a tooth at a dentist appointment. Sorry, guys.
Because that's what liars do. They focus on meaningless details. That's how they try to like spin the story. Like, but the thing is, when you ask people about like secret meetings with other governments or things, they don't have to tell you, but they'll at least say like, I met with Gorbachev, or I met with so-and-so, or I was on a national security briefing. Like they give you like a thing, and then they just say, it's due to national security, I'm not going to tell you. Or like George Bush on Kimmel was like, yeah, I saw it, but I'm not going to tell you anything. So when you come up with like a crazy, ridiculous thing, and you sort of have these like telltales, these poker tells, if you will, in terms of like, this is what liars do, that just makes us look deeper. That looks us look more, because it's like, well, what were you doing that is so secretive, right? That you were scuttled away in the middle of the night and disappeared, and you have such a poor story. He was after Truman, right? Yeah, so he was in the 50s, and Truman sort of started all of this. So Truman would have been very reactive to like Roswell and UFOs. Eisenhower, as his successor, would have had more of a game plan, I imagine.
Exactly.
Right? He would have had a couple years coming into this, because around that time, I believe in the 50s is also when the famous Washington, D.C. lights.
1954. And that was when this golf trip happened. When he disappeared was in 1954. So I think it was about a week where there was just hundreds of sightings of UFOs in Washington, D.C. area. I mean, that's equivalent to a UFO landing on the lawn of the White House. If that stuff's happening, then our president disappears to supposedly meet with these extraterrestrials. Supposedly it was the tall whites, the Nordics, that he met with in that situation. I mean, it's that makes sense to me. If that stuff's happening all around the same time. Another incident and another story attached to Eisenhower. I said he's met with. I think there was 3 different times he supposedly met with an alien species, and I'm wondering if the tall whites were the ones that negotiated a meeting with supposedly the Greys, and supposedly the story goes that he reached a deal with the Greys, allowing them to capture Earthling cattle and humans for medical experiments, provided they return the humans safely home. But since then, there has been millions of abductions reported. And I mean, if those claims are true, that's fucking crazy. Like abduction phenomenon wasn't as big before that. Like there were a few, but it has exploded since then. So if that's like a true story, that's fucking wild, man. And it just adds up.
So abduction phenomenon, people were getting abducted, but nobody talked about it. Because again, it was a shadowy thing. In the Unsolved Mysteries episode we've mentioned before, that was in 1969, I believe. They talk about getting abducted. abduction as we know it today was not, it wasn't, it was made popular in the 80s by Whitley Scriber, his book, I believe it was called Communion. And he talks about his abduction experience. And it's like a top-selling book. And that's when it becomes mainstream and people start talking about it. That's why I've compared it to like the Me Too movement, in the sense that this was always happening. It just wasn't, it was something that was spoken about in back rooms, and it wasn't like, it was like taboo to say out loud in a mainstream. But once it was like the lid was blown off and everybody was like, oh, it's okay to talk about this. This happened to me. This happened to me. So the weird thing and what it makes, again, I realize we're talking about our president of the United States making like a pact with aliens
to sacrifice Americans. But that's why it's so crazy. It's so crazy it can be real, you know?
But you're talking about a war hero general who saw the worst atrocities committed in human history in World War II and the genocide of the Jewish people. We're talking about he defeated like a supervillain number one in Adolf Hitler. So this guy is aware of what's capable. And the other thing is, these lights are appearing, these UFO sightings are happening over DC, and we're at the time scrambling our jet fighters to like intercept them and scare them off, and we can't do shit. Like, they are outmaneuvering us and we are clearly outmatched. So put yourself in his shoes. Negotiations, if you've ever been in one, I am in them every day for a living. It's what I do. I work in like sales and stuff. Negotiations are tough. And the whole key to negotiations are you must be leveraged, right? Like, you have to have something that the other person wants. And they obviously have something you want, and you're trying to figure out like a common ground. If you're just like totally smoked, this is why we spend so much money on our national defense and our military budget, is because we always want to have that strong right hand when we're dealing with other countries. And that's why the U.S. sort of can be perceived as a bully or whatever. And I just did air quotes again, quote unquote bully, is when the military is your ultimate leverage chip, right? Like, if you have the best military in the world, you're immediately going to be like at a higher place in negotiations. So if you're negotiating with a race that your fastest jets available can't hold a candle to, how are you leveraged? Like, where do you even begin the negotiation if they're just like, we're going to take this from you? And you're like, well, let's talk about it. And they're like, no, you have nothing to offer us. We're an interstellar or intergalactic race. You know what I mean? And again, I'm just sort of speculating about this. Do I necessarily believe in all this stuff? No, I just heard these stories and I try to look at, like I said, the human perspective. If you're Dwight Eisenhower and you're like, again, who the hell do you call? They're like, the aliens have landed. We didn't know who else to call to like negotiate with them. So I guess we'll call the president. You know, you can't bail. What are you going to do? What if you're the president? You can't be like, nah, can we talk? Can you get someone else to negotiate? So you got to show up. And then like, what do you do? I don't know.
And that guy's hard as rocks. Like, I couldn't imagine, you know, me witnessing like Jackie Gleason. You said he hit himself for 3 months, and his wife said that he looked like he just sunk into the couch when he got home. And he just looked like he saw a ghost. Like, the majority of Americans would experience something like that and like shake him to their core. To where Ike's seen some shit. He's been in the middle of war for a while. Right. And you know, I think he got warmed up to it a little bit through Truman's administration. So he was the guy to meet. You know, the most powerful man in the world at the time.
Well, and honestly, just he's the guy that I'd want out there. You know what I mean? Like I don't know who the equivalent today would be, but I definitely
not Trump.
No, definitely not. Oh my god! But
I'd be interested. I would be interested. I think he would leak it immediately if he knew anything. If like that was I don't think he could hide that shit. He speaks off the cuff way too much to hide something like that.
You kind of started at Obama and went back. I didn't know if you were going to bring.
I was going to end it with Trump. I was going to.
All right. I'll let you. I'm not going to ruin your close. I'm not going to steal your thunder. I didn't know you were going to the bullpen for Wild Thing at the end.
Of course. What do you think? I mean, I was going to bring it back home, baby.
Let's do it. So anyway, to just wrap up, like Eisenhower, dude, like he did a lot of things and he was like a great president. Again, talk about approval ratings. Yeah. Again, I think he was one of the highest, most beloved presidents that we've ever had. And he did a lot of great things. I mean, he like instituted highways and again, this is like when the technological boom sort of starts to come out. Like he was, like, you're right. He was at the helm during not only the height of UFO mania, but this is really like what people consider the like golden age of America. It was like the 50s, right? It was like white picket fence, 2 cars in the garage, living that American dream. And he was at the helm for that thing. So like, he's got a lot of crazy stuff, and obviously something happened there, and that's what I meant by like these presidents that we're talking about now, Truman, Eisenhower. These guys seemed way more privy to information. I mean, even like we skipped LBJ and Gerald Ford. Ford was, I think he wasn't president very long, so he probably didn't get a ton. But right up until Nixon, man, I think that they were in on it. It was a government conspiracy and a government thing, and then it slowly moved towards the private sector.
Yeah, I mean, we're just getting kind of the quick hits on this one. I mean, if we covered every single president, it would be a month-long, five episode thing. So I just wanted to get the quick hits, some of my favorite stories involved with them, with this episode special you guys are getting. So he was the general we mentioned during Truman's administration, and during the most infamous UFO crash of all time, which was Roswell. And after that happened, the same year, it was 1947, right? When Roswell happened. Yep. Truman signed the National Security Act, which ultimately started the CIA. He basically started something that's like, okay, we got to do something to where we can keep this stuff private and classify this information from the American public, and made it official. Like that's the biggest red flag to me, or it's the most interesting thing. Like, okay, there's supposedly this huge UFO crash in 1947 in Roswell, and then within, I don't know, probably months, our president is signing a National Security Act about how we classify this information and keep things private from the public. Like, that's really interesting timing to me.
Right. So Roswell has such huge implications, not only because of it being like, the beginning of disclosure, and I mean, it was disclosed when it first crashed that it was a flying saucer. So I think Linda Moulton Howe had one of my favorite quotes, which was, Roswell was disclosure, and we've just been waiting for confirmation this whole time, right? So a couple things to unpack here. When people talk about the government as like a cover-up, a conspiracy, or whatever, the government coming out, at this time, the government is always multiple agencies, okay? And then the government is notoriously slow and is notoriously non-communicative. So the reason why he creates the National Security Act and then develops the Central Intelligence Agency, keyword central, is he creates a unit where all the intelligence coming from Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, all that stuff is going to go into one central hub. That's huge. That's massive, because what that means is now there's one entity in charge of all information.
Well, that wasn't the only thing in 1947 that he created. He supposedly instructed the Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal, to set up Operation Majestic 12, which is supposedly its top secret panel of scientists and military leaders just to study and recover alien spacecraft. I mean, that's not fully public.
So Majestic 12 is part of this, but
all the same time.
So so Truman has created the CIA, but he also creates the Secretary of Defense. So I'm just giving people this lesson is this is all triggered by Roswell. So Forrestal is United States of America's first Secretary of Defense, just to kind of give people like, that's epic. He comes out. At the time, he was just like the head of the Air Force or something like that. Mm-hmm. He had a different high-ranking thing, but he comes out to Roswell and investigates it, and something shook him, okay? And the reason why I'm sort of giving this lesson and stuff, because the reason why intelligence and stuff was decentralized was because back in the day, people were a little more like patriotic, if you will, or whatever. But they didn't trust government. They didn't want big, expansive government. And they thought if you centralize these types of things, this type of shit would happen, which would be people would keep secrets, people would hoard the information, right? It would be easier to control and manipulate versus like more people knowing different things, right? So when the centralization starts to happen, whether it's the CIA or this Majestic 12, you get this rift. And what happens is half of Majestic 12 and these people are like, absolutely lock it down, it needs to be a secret. And half of them are like, and Forrestal was on the other side, was, no, this needs to go public.
Yeah.
And the reason why Forrestal is so interesting to me, and I love this guy's trajectory, is because over the course of the next 2 years, he descends into like mental, not mental illness. It ate him up. He clearly was keeping a secret. Yeah. It ate him up. He eventually gets institutionalized and then thrown out of like a 9th floor window, mob style, on in a naval hospital where, you know, there's no cameras and it's all military based stuff. So like local law enforcement can investigate, and it's just like, he must have committed suicide. Story closed. End of story. Yeah, a high decorated guy appointed by the president and to investigate Roswell, who wants to disclose all this stuff, but is forced to keep secret, just happens to commit suicide 2 years later for no fucking reason. Nothing shady to see here at all, folks. But the reason why I'm bringing all this stuff up is like, this is all triggered by Roswell. Yep. So it's not just like little green men in the desert. Like, people need to understand why Roswell carries weight, not just because it was sensationalized in the press, but because it is such a catalyst and a turning point for American history. And it has real world effects. It's not just some tinfoil hat conspiracy. Yep. You've heard of the CIA, right? This is why.
Yep. This is exactly why. It doesn't add up. That's like, the more and more we dig into this subject, I mean, this has always been an interest of mine, but the more and more I dig into this, the more and more puzzle pieces start fitting together. But then you find a new hole where you're like, okay, where is this piece? How does this make sense? And you find it, and you're like, holy shit.
What do you, again, just always look at like I like to compare and contrast. So like, if you're like a murder mystery person, right? And you like true crime stuff, when you watch detectives at work, what is the first thing that like a homicide detective or someone investigating stuff always does? You see them on a chalkboard or on a wall, and what's the first thing they do? They create a timeline. Yeah. You start with a timeline.
I like the string method. I do the pictures with the the pins, and I'll string it up. I'll string it up. It's a timeline. It's an outline. It's some.
Well, you're looking at, that's like what they do if they're looking at like a mob or like they're trying to bring down.
That's what I think.
I'm talking about when
that's just fun arts and crafts.
When you catch a body, when there's a dead body, what do you do to figure out? You retrace that person's steps because you're looking for time. When was the time they were killed? And then you look for motive. And those are the two things that law enforcement get taught. And so when we're investigating UFOs, it's always good to look back. And like you said, for the last 73 years, you look back at this timeline. And then what we're looking at is all this motive stuff. So when I say I like to look at the human approach, who had motive? Like, how do they benefit from keeping this secret, or who benefits from this, right? And that's where you start to dig. In any good like investigative journalist or police officer, whoever it is, they'll tell you that's how you do it. It's not like you're going to find some big, large smoking gun type thing, because everything is so compartmentalized. It's need to know. They're not idiots. Like, sure, somewhere out there might be like one or two people that really like have all the answers, and are privy to that information. But for the most part, everybody's only given their specific piece of the puzzle to do their job. So when you're investigating this thing, you have to collect all those pieces. It's like a big jigsaw puzzle and try to put them together. And this pattern emerges that is, this stuff is real, dude.
It is.
That's where we're at in 2020, man.
And the majority of people that I know, like friends they don't know this stuff. And that's why we started this podcast. To educate and bring this kind of light, man, and kind of just to spark these conversations, because these are questions that I think should be asked. These are big existential questions that are blowing my mind, man. So,
and again, I don't know. Did you go back further than? Did you go back?
A little bit, yeah. So those are like the main stories that interested me the most. But I mean, this stuff,
like contemporary UFO.
Yeah, this stuff goes back to our founding fathers, dude. Like, goes way like Thomas Jefferson, for example. He reported a UFO, like officially reported a UFO, in I think like 1801. Dude, when did they start making airplanes? Like 1901? Like, that's 100 years before we even started aerial travel. And it's just, our president reported that, but he was also very scientific. Like,
he was vice president at the time, and he remains the highest. He remains. He was a president, but I'm saying when he made that report, he was the vice president. But still, he remains the highest official in United States government to ever report a UFO.
Yeah, it's why. I mean, didn't Reagan report? He didn't report that. That's just a story. I guess it wasn't an official report then.
He never went on. No,
but he was only governor. He was only governor at the time. So,
correct.
Yeah,
he had a sighting.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm talking about Thomas Jefferson witnessed a UFO, or he took the UFO claim to this like scientific coalition. I forget what the name of, but it was like household names like Ben Franklin and and all those Paul Revere and all these guys.
And all those guys believed in this stuff. They didn't believe that. They believed that we were there was other beings out there in the stars, man.
They were all products and children of the Age of Enlightenment. So of course they did. They were star people.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look like American history and like the whole idea of the Freemasons, or just go in the Capitol building and look at like, I didn't know about like on the top of the Capitol building, the statue that's up there. It's like, it's a star person with like eagle wings. She's like transforming into a person to fly up into the space, and like
even our Washington Monument is aligned with the Pleiades system. Orion's, the biggest, like the pyramids of Giza align with that, and these is like just more pieces of the puzzle that are coming together. It's unbelievable. I mean, the symbols are all over the place too. The Freemason symbols, like why is there an all-seeing eye and a pyramid on our dollar?
I mean,
it's just weird.
So what I would say, and I'll play skeptic with this stuff because again, I know, and I'm privy to the same stuff that you're watching, but it's like you see this stuff, and kind of where my brain again, like it's cool to be like, oh yeah, they were all like stonemasons, and there's like the Illuminati, and there's all this like secret stuff. Yeah, sure, that could be, but also they also could have just been pulling from symbols, like historic symbols. Just like you do any day now when you're running like a marketing ad campaign for a business.
Oh, that's boring.
Certain images evoke certain things in people. So,
what is the American dollar invoking you? What does that symbol mean to you? I don't.
Well, American democracy was founded off of the principles from the Greeks and the Romans, and they got them from ultimately the Egyptians. The all-seeing eye is God looking down and seeing everything that you do. And so there's a lot of these different types of things that are in American culture. Now, again, you can read into them. I enjoy listening to people reading into them. I'm just also trying to take the side of
I love it. That's what
keep us grounded.
That's why I like having these conversations with you. Why do you think so if you look at Washington D.C., it's structured and designed in such a weird way. Like, why is the Washington National Monument aligned with that star system. That's just really interesting because the pyramids are aligned that way. There's
Again,
several. It's important places of great power and influence have been connected directly to the construction of monuments that align with the Pleiades system. That's what's very interesting to me.
And again, I agree, but you got to look back and you got to say, okay, were they the Great Pyramids are aligned with Orion's belt, okay? And then DC, they align these certain things. All I'm saying is they're aligning things. Are they aligning things because they're believing in supernatural and aliens, all this stuff? Or are they just aligning them because it's cool that the Egyptians did it? That's all I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like we don't know. We'll never really know. Like we can't ask the architect of the city planner, go back in time and be like, were you a believer in aliens? Is that why you did this? Or was this sort of like you paying homage to the founding, the building blocks of democracy?
Supposedly, Thomas Jefferson was one of the men that designed Washington, D.C.
Yeah, he did, because he designed Monticello. He helped design Capitol Hill. There's no denying that DC is a very unique city. Usually, cities are designed in like a very grid system.
Yeah, they're like a diamond,
like New York. But it's just simple things like immediately DC is. And again, dude, you're talking. I'm coming to you live from not 30 minutes away from Washington D.C. right now.
There's something special about that city, man. It's this power that you feel. It's this vibration.
It's a 10 by 10 square that was turned so that the points of it faced north, south, east, and west. The reason why I'm bringing that stuff up is just because I'm not so sure that that's an alien thing to like turn the thing so that it faces north, south, so it faces the points on a compass. I think that's just kind of like a
cool thing to do.
Why not?
Okay.
Yeah, I just think it's like why the fuck not? What are you just going to have it like point to like oblivion? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's just some things that I'm like, some things I'm with, some things I just think we read too much into, in the sense of not everybody is like super connected. But yeah, Thomas Jefferson, it is interesting. The reason why I like that story is because that's a documented thing that, again, he like filed a report and took it to the scientific commission of the local like philosophers and scientists to like debate the issue. So clearly it was like it affected him enough that he brought it to his buddies to actually like debate and like research, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, talk about feeling outmanned and outgunned. If we thought like 5-star General Eisenhower was like, holy shit, look at these things go. Could you imagine what those guys thought of? Like they're still fighting with like black powder and like ball bearings in their rifles. And like, if they saw a UFO, they would immediately just be like, nah, that thing could kill us instantly. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't know. I mean,
we don't stand a chance.
Who knows exactly?
You're gonna charge it with a sword?
Who knows exactly what he saw? If he thought it was a threat, I mean, it could have been spiritual, but it was enough to make a report of it.
George Washington had a spiritual one.
He did. Both George and Lincoln had some interesting experiences, I think, before they went to war. And then those can be interpreted in so many different ways.
Washington's was at Valley Forge, which was considered the turning point of the Revolutionary War. Was that he wandered off into the wilderness, and he said that he was encountered by an angel or a being in white. I'm not sure if he said angel or if we applied angel later in
long ago
we've transcribed. But he said, well, the reason why we know of this is that his servant is the one who recorded it, like in a journal or something. But it was like said that he went out and this being in white and approached him in the wilderness by himself and basically showed him America, like in the future, basically. And then that was like sort of what like reinvigorated him, because this was like, it was like in December in Valley Forge, PA, which is like freezing and it's like snowing, and like his half his army is dying or they're hungry and they're quitting on him, and he's like, I don't think we're gonna win this thing. And then all of a sudden an alien / angel, whatever it is, appears and kind of reignites his fire, and they go on. And it was like a pivotal thing that they stayed there, because had he retreated, we probably wouldn't have won that war. So he hangs in there, and then the British actually end up retreating because they're like, oh shit, this guy means business. We need to go recoup. So anyway, Interesting stuff there, dude.
Yeah.
It's whether it's spiritual or alien, I don't know. But
I think it's all one and the
like,
same,
cool.
man. I think it's all one and the same. But this kind of, I want to bring it back to current day. And with Trump and like with things,
shit.
I mean, things that are happening now, man, like this 2020 has been so crazy and the Pentagon's finally starting to give us a little nugget of something, you know, and they're releasing these UFO videos. I would think that they would ask him more questions and they're just not. You mentioned one instance when he was asked and he was just like, I don't particularly believe in this stuff. But there was one video I found where I believe it's his son kind of questioning him in these same things, and I kind of wanted to give that a watch and a listen. If you can cue that up for us, Smots.
Before you leave office, will you let us know if there's aliens? Because this is the only thing I really want to know. I want to know what's going on. Would you ever open up Roswell and let us know what's really going on there?
So many people ask me that question.
I know, it sounds almost ridiculous, but it's actually the real question I want to know.
It sounds like a cute question, but it's actually, there are millions and millions of people that want to go there, that want to see it. I won't talk to you about what I know about it, but it's very interesting. But Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
So you're saying you may declassify? Oh. You'll take it?
Well, I'll have to think about that one, right? I'll have to think.
All right.
Yeah, just a short little nugget.
nothing cuter than two sociopaths talking to each other. So he's been. I mean. Sorry, I can't get over his son is just so. His son is so sleazy looking. Like, I'm sorry if you're a Republican and you vote for Trump, whatever, man. I'm not judging you, but his son is just looks like such a greaseball in that clip there. But not only was he asked that, so it's a very interesting response. Yeah. The problem with Trump that I have with him has always been his public speaking.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for me to read into anything he says. Because he's such a freaking salesman all the time. Mm-hmm. He never says anything that, like if he thinks that he can get an edge on something, like, oh, I'm being asked this question, and if I like tease it, he's like a TV producer guy. Like he knows how to tease, he knows how to like entice you into wanting more. And that's what that feels like to me. And it's like, because it kind of works. I'm like, does he know? I don't know. But like, of all the presidents we've talked to, I gotta say, I would imagine Donald Trump would be the last guy that would actually be read in on this stuff.
Yeah, I think he's the least interested as well. Like, I don't think he gives a shit. He's a businessman. Like, he doesn't care about paranormal or UFOs or witchcraft. Like, he doesn't give a shit about any of that. He doesn't believe in it particularly. You know what I mean? So it's like... Yeah. I just thought it was a fun piece because it was his son. I feel his son was genuinely asking him.
But this one definitely is a good question, and he was definitely more
open than he usually is, yeah.
Because it's his son. But he was also asked this again. This is why I think this topic is cool. He was also asked famously by Tucker Carlson during the interview that aired on the Super Bowl at like halftime or whatever, which is like, again, talk about like on the record, the Super Bowl is like
the world's watching.
Dude, it's like the most televised thing in the world other than the moon landing.
Yeah.
And so he's asked if UFOs exist, and that's just like to Tucker Carlson's credit because he's been sort of like out there on the front lines as like a UFO guy. Again, regardless of what you think about Tucker and Fox News, I'm just saying he's been kind of like the UFO reporter guy for the mainstream media. So he fired that question away, and Trump, I think Trump was pretty new to office still. So again, he probably didn't know a whole lot. But I think that clip is interesting. And then obviously he was asked recently about the UAP, the formation of the UAP task force. And the question posed to him in that one was, why? Why are they looking into this? What's up with this thing? And he just said, well, that came across my desk 2 days ago, so I have to look into it. And then he started rambling about the military. Well, again, this comes back to Trump. People read into this, and they're like, oh, he immediately started talking about the military, so maybe that's him saying, like, he believes in it or he thinks it's a threat. No, if you go back and you listen to that interview, he just, like, casts it aside, and then talking about the military is just him, like, campaigning. And then he says, I'll have to look into it.
Yeah.
Which, you know, He's a pretty good liar.
It's easy to
get. It's an easy response. The funny thing is the UAP task force, though, by the way, was established like back in like August or July. Mm-hmm. So the fact that it would have just come across his desk like 2 days ago, because that clip was from like earlier this week, I saw that. Like this is when he called into Fox News for like 2 hours and rambled on.
Yeah.
So why would we know about the UAP task force in August and he didn't find out about it until like 2 days ago?
Yeah, and I also want to call bullshit on what he knows and what he doesn't know, because why else would you start Space Force? Like, why would you take your time and your presidency to start Space Force?
Which is a great show on Netflix, by the way. Yeah. Well, I think that he continued Star Wars. So Reagan started the Star Wars program. Reagan was kind of,
obviously nervous. For that. Yeah, obviously nervous with what's going on.
Well, and people kind of made fun of him for it. They thought he was kind of out there for doing it, but nonetheless, they, started it, and then they stopped it, again, with my air quotes on the podcast. The reason why I'm quoting that is just because I'm saying, I don't know if it ever really stopped.
Yeah.
Like, satellite and like the whole idea of like whether it's aliens or not, but the idea of like the ICBM missile that can go up into like lower Earth orbit and hit us, the idea that like Moscow could launch a rocket that could strike DC within 30 minutes with a nuclear warhead was terrifying. And so the whole idea is they wanted to have like satellites that could like shoot it out of the air with a fucking laser beam or something. And I think that's a totally real thing that I don't think, like, even though Star Wars was like, didn't last very long, I definitely think that the plans are like someone probably still developed the technology along the way. And that's where sort of Space Force comes in. I've said that on our earlier shows, is like, as human beings and Americans start to go into outer space, you're going to need some sort of like law enforcement type of, someone's got to make sure the rules are there's rules, right? Otherwise it just turns into the Wild West and we're just all shooting each other with laser beams or something.
Well, speaking of Wild West and Star Wars, you see the dude that made the actual like retractable lightsaber, and they're like testing it and shit. They're like cutting cars in half and stuff. It's fucking dope. Yeah, dude. Like, he made a retractable fucking lightsaber and they're fucking shit up.
Well, now I know my new my next YouTube rabbit hole I'm gonna fall into. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, dude, the idea of Space Force and like what Trump did. I mean, say what you will about Trump, he's still the president and does know some things, but again, from all intents and purposes, what I've learned through investigating and all this stuff, this stuff is being handled on a somewhat privately held base. And again, Trump was not a very popular president from the get-go. Again, sorry if you voted for him. I'm not trying to ruffle your feathers. I'm just saying the facts is he never exceeded a 50% approval rating. And even his own staff was like, when you had like John Kelly and, God, I can't even remember them. Seems like ages ago. But all these guys were like top military officials. Those would have been the guys that would have had that information. And they all got fired or quit or resigned. And now he's just sort of been in there for the last few years with like his yes men people who are not, they're not in the greater, I guess what they're calling it is the deep state, which is just like the institutional, the people that are in DC that are career people that like you can't vote out of office. You know what I mean?
I get you. Well, I think it's a good time to wrap up the show, man. I think it was a good episode, dude. I really enjoyed researching this one, and
I know you did.
Digging deep, and we don't forget about you, your foreign listeners. We see you guys over there in the UK and Australia and all over the world. It's kind of exciting to see you guys listening in, and we're gonna get to the world leaders.
We're in like aliens. 16 different countries. People are listening to us right now, which is pretty cool. So. Dunka Shane.
Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. And I want to remind you all to vote. Please go out and vote. No matter who it's for, like, just go out and do it, man. That's still your American right to go and do it.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into this special edition presidential. Hopefully after November 3rd on that Tuesday, we'll be bringing you another episode if the world is still isn't on fire from whatever happens after the election.
Oh, man, something's going to go down, I'm telling you.
Just remember, if your guy doesn't win, it's okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to take to the streets and burn shit down or shoot people or do any craziness. Guess what? In 4 more years, you can vote for the other guy. Or in 2 years, you get to vote for the Senate people that'll just cockblock whatever this president wants to do anyway. And nothing will ever get done, and we'll all just continue to complain.
Yeah, and don't ruin your Thanksgiving dinners with your family. Just enjoy them. You don't need to argue and throw cake across the table because someone voted for the other person. Who gives a fuck? Just enjoy each other's company, okay? You can civilly debate. That's cool. But just agree to disagree. All right?
I'm throwing fucking cake.
You're throwing cake?
Yeah.
Oh, he's flipping the table.
I'm breaking some
flipping
shit.
the table.
Breaking
Watch
plates.
out.
Pass me that turkey leg, Grandma. So anyway, guys, well, thanks so much for tuning in. As always, follow us. Check us out at IBelieveInHumansPodcast.com. Check us out on Instagram and Facebook, I Believe in Humans Podcast. Dustin, we still doing the YouTube?
Yeah, don't forget to tune in on YouTube. Check out our Patreon and donate. Buy a t-shirt, man. Go to our website at www.IBelieveInHumansPodcast.com. If you guys can't...
/shop.
Yeah, /shop. If you can't donate or if it doesn't make sense to buy a t-shirt, just if you like the show, share it with a friend. Tell your mom about it. Tell your cousin. Just help us get us out there and let us do our thing, man, because we're really enjoying this, and the more listeners, the better.
Absolutely, guys. So thanks so much for tuning in to this special edition. And always remember, Dustin, it's okay to believe.
You're not alone.
Peace.
Go vote. What? That's a good headline. President Clinton rides in a UFO. It's better than an Epstein's plane. Oh, I believe it.
Welcome there.
UFOs are real.
Oh, Bat Boy is gonna have. I'm gonna have nightmares looking at that thing.